He had stood before roaring crowds. He had debated presidents, stared down cameras, signed bills with the flick of a gold pen. But tonight, Donald Trump couldn't sleep. It wasn't the press. It wasn't politics. It was something quieter. Something he couldn't name. The White House, for once, wasn't humming. No echoes of footsteps down the marble halls, no aides knocking with updates. Just stillness, deep, untouchable stillness. He sat up in bed, rubbing his face with both hands. The silk sheets felt colder than usual. Somewhere outside, a branch tapped lightly against a window pane, like a soft question no one wanted to answer. He stood, no tie, no jacket, just an old navy sweater and the hush of carpeted halls beneath his feet. He walked with no real direction, just motion, like a man following the echo of something he hadn't yet remembered. They say power keeps you awake, that it's the weight of responsibility pressing on your chest. But this wasn't that. It was a question, not his own, a child's. Have you ever gotten lost in your own house? He hadn't answered, not then. Maybe because it wasn't a question for answering, not really. Maybe because, for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if he even knew the answer. And if you've ever wandered your own mind at 3 a.m., if you've ever looked out the window and wondered how a life so loud could feel so far away, then maybe, just maybe, this story is for you. Because this isn't about politics, it's about presence. And the night a 5-year-old boy reminded the President of the United States that even the most powerful man in the world can still get lost, not in war rooms or pulling numbers, but in his own silence. Trump's footsteps echoed faintly as he passed the portraits of men whose names shaped history. He didn't look at them. Tonight, he wasn't one of them. He was just a man who couldn't sleep. And somewhere down the East Wing corridor, a small light flickered under a door not usually left open. He paused. The doorknob was warm. The room beyond smelled faintly of old paper and wood polish. One of the lesser-known libraries of the residence, rarely used except by staff or board historians. And there he was, curled on the carpet, blazer wrinkled, napkin in hand like a blanket. X. Elon Musk's 5-year-old son. Trump didn't speak at first, just watched. The boy looked up, calm, not surprised, like he'd been waiting for someone. You couldn't sleep either, Trump finally asked. X nodded, simply. I get lost sometimes, Trump exhaled. Yeah, me too. And before we continue, if this quiet moment has already pulled you in, take a second to like the video, leave a comment below with your thoughts, or just if you've ever felt lost too, and don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes, the softest stories stay with us the longest. Now, let's go deeper. Into the night, into the questions, into the heart of a man who once led the world and is just now learning how to listen. The boy didn't flinch when Trump stepped into the room. Maybe it was the moonlight streaming through the high-arched windows, or the way the dust swirled in soft spirals through the air. But something about that moment felt unguarded, sacred almost, like a secret chapter in a book no one was supposed to open. X was sitting cross-legged on the thick Persian rug, a dim reading lamp beside him flickering like a heartbeat. Around him were scattered space toys, a small flashlight, and, oddly, a leather-bound copy of The Little Prince with corners worn soft from use. Trump took a slow step forward. I didn't know anyone still came in here, he said quietly. X looked up. Me neither. Trump eased down into the old reading chair near the boy, its leather creaking under his weight. He didn't lean in too close, didn't ask why the boy was out of bed, not yet. Instead he asked, You like that book? X shrugged. Kinda. It's sad though. Trump nodded. Yeah, it is. There was a pause. Do you know why I come in here? X asked suddenly. Trump shook his head. Because it feels like no one's in a hurry. It's the only room that doesn't beep. That caught Trump off guard. Not because it was untrue, but because he'd never noticed it. Everything else in the White House did beep. Phones, monitors, people. Always moving, always watching, always waiting for the next answer. But not this room. Not tonight. X picked up the flashlight and clicked it off and on, staring into the lens. Do you think people remember the questions they never got answers to? Trump blinked. The boy's voice was small, but the question hit hard. I think, Trump started, sometimes, those are the questions we remember most. X nodded slowly, like he'd already known that. I asked my dad once if stars ever get lonely. Trump tilted his head. What'd he say? He said no. But he said it fast. Like he didn't really hear me. Trump swallowed. Hard. Maybe he heard you, but didn't know how to answer. I don't think grown-ups like not knowing. Trump looked down at his hands. No one had ever said that to him so plainly, and certainly not a child. But he was right. Admitting you didn't know, in Trump's world, that was dangerous. Weakness. A crack in the armor. And yet, here he was. In a quiet room, at an ungodly hour, with a 5-year-old holding a flashlight like it was the last star in the sky, and for once, he didn't feel in control. He didn't feel like a leader. He felt like a man, lost in a house too big, sitting beside someone brave enough to ask what he himself had buried decades ago. Do you ever feel lonely? The boy asked. Trump inhaled slowly. Sometimes. Another pause. What do you do when you feel like that? He thought for a moment. Usually, I pretend I don't. X didn't laugh, didn't judge, just looked at him. Deeply. Like he was trying to decide if the president was telling the truth. And then he said, "That sounds heavy." Trump smiled. Not the kind you give to cameras, but something quieter, almost broken. It is, he said. The boy turned the flashlight off. The moonlight was enough now. Sometimes, X whispered. I think people build rockets not to explore space, but to get away from feeling small. Trump looked at him. Really looked at him. This child, Elon Musk's son, wasn't just smart, he was wide awake in a world that preferred people to stay asleep. You ever tell your dad that? Trump asked. No. He's always moving. I don't think he'd stop long enough to hear it. Trump nodded. Yeah, I know that feeling. X looked up again. Do you think people can change? Trump didn't answer right away. He stared out the window. The branches of the trees swayed gently, casting shadows across the carpet like ripples in a forgotten pond. I think, he said finally, some people spend their whole lives trying not to. Because changing means admitting something wasn't right before. X nodded. Like not listening? Exactly. They sat in silence. But it wasn't awkward, it was full, a silence made of presence, not avoidance. Trump leaned back, exhaling long and low. You ever feel like the quiet is trying to tell you something? X smiled faintly. Yeah, all the time. Trump looked over, eyes a little shinier than before. What's it saying tonight? The boy paused, then, it says, you're not as alone as you think. Trump closed his eyes for a beat, let it sink in. Let it break something open. Gently, and just like that, the leader of the free world was learning how to be still. How to be present. How to be found. Because sometimes it's not about being right. It's about being there. If this moment hit you like it did me, take a second to tap that like button. And if you've ever found truth in silence, drop a comment below. And of course, make sure you're subscribed, so you don't miss part 3 of this quiet journey. The room hadn't changed. Still lit by moonlight. Still dust in the air. Still two souls. One small, one storied, sitting in a space that felt like it existed outside of time. But something had changed. The silence between them no longer felt like a pause. It felt like a doorway. Trump adjusted in his chair, feeling the stiffness in his back but not minding it. The boy beside him sat cross-legged, elbows on knees, chin resting in his palms like a miniature philosopher. Then, out of nowhere, X asked, "Do you ever wish you were someone else?" Trump blinked. He wasn't expecting that. Not from a 5-year-old, not at midnight, and not while sitting in a forgotten corner of the most powerful house in the world. Sometimes, Trump answered quietly. When I was younger, when I felt like who I was wasn't enough. What did you do with that feeling? X asked, eyes unblinking. Trump hesitated, then said the only thing that felt true. I buried it, deep. Then I built towers over it. The boy didn't say anything. He didn't have to. That's the thing about real questions. They don't just hang in the air, they dig. They unearth. And tonight Trump was realizing he'd spent most of his life trying to build a map for a world that was never meant to be navigated. Only experienced. I asked my dad once, X said softly, what happens to people who never find out who they are? Trump leaned forward. What did he say? X shook his head. He said, "We build them rockets so they can find something better in space." Trump stared at the boy, not because it was a bad answer, but because it sounded so much like something Elon would say. And for the first time, Trump didn't feel smug about it. He felt sad. Because he recognized himself in it. An instinct to answer fast, smart, clean, so you don't have to face the mess of not knowing. "What do you think?" Trump asked. "What happens to people who never figure it out?" X was quiet for a long beat, then said, "I think they just get louder, so no one hears how lost they are." And just like that, the wind knocked something loose inside the former president's chest. He looked at the boy. "Do you know how many years I've been loud?" X didn't smile, just looked at him with a kind of childlike mercy, the kind adults forget to give. Trump stood up and started pacing slowly across the room, not in frustration, not in anxiety, in realization. "I built everything," he said, half to himself. "The buildings, the brand, the voice, the name. I thought if it was big enough, no one would see the parts I didn't understand." He turned to the boy. "You asked me earlier if I wished I were someone else. Maybe I did, but the truth is, I didn't even know who I was trying to become." X hugged his knees, thoughtful, then asked, "Have you ever cried in this house?" Trump didn't expect the question, didn't expect how fast the lump rose in his throat. He swallowed hard, looked toward the windows. "Not in front of anyone," he admitted. "But yes, in the dark, when no one was watching, and I didn't even know why." X whispered, "Maybe that's when the real part of you was trying to talk." Trump walked back to the chair, sat down. Everything in him was quieter now, but not empty, just opened. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. X nodded. "I don't think I came here tonight to check on you." "What then?" "I think I came here because something in you was asking a question I was too scared to ask myself." X tilted his head. "What was the question?" "What happens when you build a whole life trying to be right, and then realize all you really wanted was to be known?" The boy said nothing for a long moment. Then, "I think you still can be." The room fell still. No more dialogue, no more questions, just that feeling, the one you get when something inside you quietly clicks back into place. Trump leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked the boy in the eyes. "Thank you for not trying to fix me," he said. "I wasn't trying to," X replied. "I was just being real." Trump smiled. "You're 5. How are you this real?" The boy thought for a second. "Maybe it's because I haven't learned to fake it yet." If this conversation moved something in you, if you've ever asked the questions no one had answers for, hit the like button. Drop a comment below. What's a question you've been carrying but never said out loud? And make sure to subscribe, because the next part of this story might just be your favorite. Long after the boy had gone back to bed, Trump stayed. Still in that moonlit room, still in that same worn chair. But now, something was shifting. Not around him, but within. He was supposed to feel like the grown-up in the conversation, like the one who knew more, had seen more, survived more. But instead he felt 5. Just 5. Small, uncertain, wondering if anyone was really listening. And that's when the memory arrived, uninvited, unannounced. Like a song you didn't know you remembered until the melody hit you in the chest. He was 8. It was autumn, New York. Cold enough for jackets, but not snow boots. He was waiting outside the principal's office, his little hands wrapped around a folded-up drawing. A crayon sketch of his older brother Fred, with a crooked smile and giant superhero cape. Trump had made it in class that morning. It was sloppy, but proud. He couldn't wait to give it to Fred when he picked him up from school that day. Except Fred never came. Instead, their driver did. No explanation, just a vague, "Fred's not feeling great today." They drove home in silence. Trump had stared at the drawing the whole ride. It was bent now, the corner torn. When they got home, he rushed up to Fred's room. The door was shut, locked. From the other side, he heard music. Slow, strange jazz. Not the kind Fred usually played. And then, a cough, a long, broken cough. And something about that moment had frozen in his bones. He never gave Fred the drawing. He folded it, tucked it behind a bookshelf, and forgot. Or tried to. Now, decades later, in the quiet of a forgotten room, that memory returned, not as nostalgia but as truth. And Trump felt it. The regret, the helplessness, the way no one had explained why Fred started disappearing in pieces, first in presence, then in spirit, then in body. No one talked about addiction. No one talked about fear. No one asked questions. And eventually, neither did he. He had learned early that silence was safer, that feelings were messy, that vulnerability was something you locked up with the good china and only pulled out when no one was watching. He stood suddenly, pacing, the memory buzzing like static in his veins. His hands, the same hands that had signed deals, shaken world leaders, held microphones, were trembling. Why am I remembering this now? He thought, but deep down he knew, because a 5-year-old boy, with moonlight in his eyes and truth in his voice, had looked straight at him and asked the one thing Trump had run from his whole life. Do you ever wish you were someone else? Yes. Yes, he did. Sometimes he wished he were Fred. The funny one, the kind one, the one who never needed to shout to be heard. Other times, he wished he were the kid before the towers, before the campaigns, before the armor. Just a boy with a picture in his hand and a big brother who hadn't closed the door yet. Trump sat back down slowly. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, almost out of instinct, and pulled out a small leather notepad. Not one of his usual ones. This was older, more personal, a relic from a different life. He hadn't written in it in years. He clicked open a pen, stared at the page, then wrote, without thinking, I never gave him the drawing. Then beneath it, and I never asked why he stopped coming. And finally, is it too late to start asking now? He stared at the ink. The letters looked steadier than his hands felt. Outside the window, the moon had shifted, lower now, softer, but it still lit the room enough for him to see clearly. Not just the page, himself. Not the brand, not the voice, not the icon, just the man who after all these years was beginning to remember what it felt like to be real. If you've ever had a memory return when you least expected it, one that made you rethink everything, hit the like button. What's something you wish you'd said or done before it was too late? Drop it in the comments. This space is for your stories too. And don't forget to subscribe. The next chapter takes us deeper into a call, a confrontation, and a quiet promise. The White House always looked most peaceful at sunrise. It was a trick of the light. The way the early amber rays slipped past the drapes and settled on everything. The marble floors, the velvet chairs, the old paintings that had seen generations of men trying to make sense of power. But that morning something felt different. Donald Trump was already awake. Not checking headlines, not scanning polls, not rehearsing soundbites. Just awake. Awake in the way a man is after a long, restless night that didn't offer sleep, but something heavier. Truth. He sat in silence, still in the clothes from the night before, the notepad open in front of him, the words from the past still fresh on the page. I never gave him the drawing. I never asked why he stopped coming. Is it too late to start asking now? He stared at them, let them hurt, because sometimes the pain was the proof that something real was finally breaking through. There was a knock at the door, soft, respectful. An aide, sir, your schedule begins in 20. General Matthews is already. Trump didn't even look up. Cancel the morning. The aide froze. All of it, sir. Trump nodded. Tell them I'll reschedule. Personal reasons. The aide hesitated. They always did when he deviated from routine, but nodded. Yes, sir. 10 minutes later, Trump stepped outside. No motorcade, no press, just a warm coat and a direction in his heart he hadn't followed in years. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but he knew it started here, with a walk not as president but as a man trying to find the boy he used to be. He turned left at the garden path, right past the south lawn, and finally, almost unconsciously, to the east hallway of the residence. He paused in front of a door, Barron's door. It was barely cracked open. A strip of soft light spilled onto the polished floor. He knocked. Gently. Nothing. He pushed it open. Inside, Barron was sitting at his desk, hoodie up, earbuds in, eyes fixed on something on his tablet. The boy looked older than Trump remembered. Maybe it was the slouch in his shoulders. Maybe it was the quiet in his face. Trump cleared his throat. Barron looked up, surprised, but not annoyed. Just curious. Hey, he said. Hey, Trump replied. Didn't mean to sneak up on you. Barron pulled the earbuds down. You didn't. I was just zoning. Trump hesitated. Mind if I sit? Barron nodded toward the bed. Sure. Trump sat down slowly, feeling the springs give beneath his weight. Not something he was used to. Usually he sat in chairs meant for command. This one reminded him of something simpler. He looked around the room. Clean. Orderly. Too quiet for someone that young. I went for a walk this morning, Trump said, watching his son's expression. Didn't know where I was going at first. Barron smirked, just slightly. Did you find it? Trump shook his head. Not yet, but I think I found the first step. There was a pause. Then Trump said carefully, Barron, can I ask you a question? A real one? The boy tilted his head, surprised. Sure. What do you wish I knew about you? The question hung in the air, longer than expected. Barron looked down, thought for a while, then said, That, I don't need to be protected from the hard stuff. I just don't want to face it alone. Trump swallowed hard. I thought I was shielding you by staying strong, by keeping things simple. Barron nodded slowly. I know, but sometimes when everything feels curated, it starts to feel fake. Trump closed his eyes for a moment, then reached into his coat pocket and handed Barron the leather notepad, open to the page he had written earlier. Barron read it. His face didn't move at first, but when he got to the third line, he looked up. Is it too late to start asking now? Their eyes locked. Trump said, almost a whisper, I don't want to be a man who never asked the right questions. Barron nodded, voice steady. Then don't be. Trump smiled. A real one. The kind that feels earned, not performed. He stood, gently squeezed his son's shoulder, and turned to leave. Before he reached the door, Barron called out, Dad? Trump turned. Yeah? You found it, the first step. Trump didn't respond. He didn't need to. His smile said enough. If this chapter hit you in that quiet place where honesty lives, take a moment to like the video. Tell me in the comments what's a first step you've been scared to take, and don't forget to subscribe. The next chapter brings Trump face to face with someone he's avoided too long. It was almost noon by the time Elon arrived. The East Wing felt unusually quiet, as if even the marble floors were waiting. Trump was already seated. Not behind a desk, not at a podium, just in a soft chair near the windows of the Roosevelt Room, sunlight slanting in behind him, casting long, thoughtful shadows. Elon entered, phone in one hand, mind somewhere else. Sorry, I'm late, he said, not looking up. They rerouted the call from Berlin and Starlink's down again in... You're not late, Trump interrupted, gently. Elon paused, looked up. This wasn't the version of Donald he was used to. No pacing, no sales pitch, no punchline, just presence. Sit, Trump said simply. Elon blinked, then obeyed. There was a beat of silence between them. The kind men like them usually ran from, but this time Trump didn't. I talked to your son last night, he said, calm, not accusing, just honest. Elon's posture stiffened just slightly. Yeah? He was in the moonlit library, alone. Elon frowned. He sneaks off sometimes. Doesn't like bedtime. Trump nodded. He also doesn't like being unanswered. That landed. Elon shifted. He asked you something, didn't he? He asked me a lot of things. Some I didn't know how to answer. Trump leaned forward, eyes locked in. But I answered anyway, because pretending I knew would hurt him more than telling him the truth. Elon looked down at his hands. What truth? That I don't know what happens when people die? A long pause. Trump continued, softer now. But I told him what I do believe. That love doesn't vanish. That it moves, like light from a star. Even after the star is gone. Elon swallowed. That idea lingered. A little too long, a little too close. He told me you said people go back to the stars, Trump said, voice even. I did, Elon replied, almost defensive. It was poetic. No, Trump corrected. It was fast. Elon flinched. Trump let the silence stretch, then added, Your son's not looking for poetry, Elon. He's looking for you. For a moment, the world's richest man said nothing. Then, softly, I don't know how to be that kind of present. You built rockets, Trump said. You colonized bandwidth. You turned Mars into a to-do list. But your kid? He doesn't need you to reach the stars. He needs you to sit on the floor. Elon cracked a smile. You sound like a therapist. Trump smirked. God help us all. They sat for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. Then Trump leaned back. You know, last night I remembered something about my brother. Fred. Elon looked up. He died before I ever really asked him who he was. A pause. Trump's voice softened. Don't let that happen to you. Elon blinked fast. Like he didn't expect to feel anything, but something had slipped past the firewall. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, Trump stood, walked to the window, looked out toward the garden. He asked me if people can change, he said without turning around. Elon didn't respond. Trump turned back. What would you have said? Elon sighed. I probably would have said no. Why? Because if people change, it means you might have to admit you were wrong. Trump nodded. Exactly. He stepped closer. But here's the thing. The most powerful shift I've felt this week wasn't control. It was release. Of what? Trump held his gaze. Of the need to know everything. Of the fear of silence. Of the shame of not being the man everyone thinks you are. Another silence, this time shared. Then Trump said, You don't have to be perfect, Elon. You just have to stop moving long enough for your kid to catch up. Elon looked out the window, eyes glassy, words caught. Then finally he whispered, Thanks for reminding me. Trump nodded once. No smugness. No show. Just men. In the rarest state of all. Real. If you've ever tried so hard to be everything and forgot how to just be enough, hit that like button. What would you say if you had one honest minute with someone you've avoided too long? Let it out in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed, because in the next chapter, a 5-year-old returns with one last question that might just change everything. Later that afternoon, under the soft gold of early dusk, the boy found his way back to the garden. Same path, same breeze. Same bench beneath the sycamore. Donald Trump was already there, coat folded beside him, eyes lifted to the sky as if searching for something he'd once forgotten. X walked up slowly, cradling a worn sketchbook in his arms. His blazer was too big for him, his shoelaces were untied, but his steps were steady. Trump looked up and smiled. Back again, huh? X nodded. I had one more question. Trump patted the seat beside him. Let's hear it. The boy sat down, opened the sketchbook, and traced a finger over a small drawing of a rocket, lifting off from Earth. What if the people we love don't come back? The question landed like a whisper inside a cathedral. Trump stared ahead, not because he didn't know how to answer, but because he finally understood why the question mattered. Then, he said quietly, we carry them forward. X looked up. How? Trump pointed to the sketchbook. In the drawings, in the questions, in the way we look at the world a little softer because they once looked at us that way. The boy was silent. Then, slowly, he leaned his head against Trump's arm, not seeking protection, just connection. And Trump, the man known for walls, towers, noise, stayed still. Because in that moment, two people sat on a bench, one with 5 years of wonder, the other with decades of armor, and somehow they met in the middle. No titles, no roles, just presence. Some answers don't come in words. Sometimes they come in silence, the kind that says, I'm here, I see you, and I'm not going anywhere. If this story moved something in you, let us know in the comments. And if you believe the right question can change everything, like this video and subscribe for more human stories in unlikely places.